I never expected that Christmas Eve would be the moment I finally saw my parents for who they truly were. The sterile scent of antiseptic clung to the walls of my hospital room, the four-drip ticking in rhythm with my heartbeat. Outside, the streets of Las Vegas glittered in holiday lights, but inside room 214 it was just me, my 2-year-old twins, and a nurse named Elise who was quietly checking my vitals. My abdomen felt like it was being twisted from the inside, and I could barely sit up straight. And then came the call. I answered on speaker because my hands were shaking too badly to hold the phone. My mother's voice blared through the tiny speaker, high-pitched and impatient. "Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again," she snapped. "We've had these Elton John tickets for months." I froze. I just asked if they could watch the twins while I underwent emergency surgery that night. That's all. Not forever. Just a few hours so I wouldn't go under anesthesia, terrified that my children would be left alone in a hospital hallway if something went wrong. I looked over at my babies, Ethan drawing on the whiteboard Elise had set up, and Emily tucked into a blanket on the cot beside my bed, holding her stuffed elephant. My stomach clenched again, harder this time. Pain, rage, shame, they all twisted together. My voice cracked. "Mom, I might not wake up. The doctors think I'm bleeding internally." My dad cut in this time, his tone colder. "You're becoming a burden, Daniel. We're retired. We deserve peace in our lives." My name is Daniel Morgan. I'm 32 years old. Widowed. A mother of 2. And apparently the biggest inconvenience in my parents' life. They weren't always like this, or maybe I just refused to see them clearly for far too long. Growing up, my younger sister Chloe was the star, the gifted one, the praised one, the one they always made time for. I was the quiet one, the strong one, the one expected to figure things out on her own. I thought maybe that would change when James and I got married. Or when we bought a house. Or when I gave them their first grandkids. But the truth was, it never changed. They came to see the twins exactly once after they were born. 1 hour. They said the babies were too fussy, too loud. They missed a birthday, then another. But I kept sending money. $2,500 every month since they took early retirement. I thought I was doing the right thing. The responsible thing. I was wrong. Elise put her hand on my arm, grounding me. "Daniel, I know someone. A nanny. Olivia. She's trained in trauma care and works with kids all the time. Let me call her." I nodded, choking back a sob. That's when I made my decision. I was done. Done begging people who saw me as a burden. Done sacrificing myself to be the good daughter. That night I stopped being Danielle, the quiet girl who took everything in silence. I was going to survive this surgery. And I was going to cut every toxic tie in my life. Starting with my parents. The surgery was over. The doctor said it went well as it could, given that I'd nearly lost half my blood volume before they got me on the table. I spent the next 48 hours in and out of consciousness. Every time I woke up I saw Olivia, the nanny Elise had called, sitting in the corner with Ethan and Emily. She brought them little picture books, snacks, and a calm I didn't even know children that age could have in a hospital. She was a godsend. When I finally had enough strength to speak, Olivia came to sit by my bedside, her voice gentle. "You scared me a little, Daniel. You're lucky Elise acted so fast. And those two." She nodded toward the twins. "They're incredible." I managed a weak smile. "So are you." It wasn't just gratitude. It was clarity. Olivia had known my children for 48 hours and already cared more about them than their own grandparents ever had. That morning I asked Elise to bring me my phone. My hands still shook, but I managed to do what I should have done years ago. I opened my banking app and canceled the monthly auto transfer to my parents. Then I wrote them a message. Just one sentence. "I will no longer be providing financial support. Don't contact me again." No anger. No explanation. They didn't deserve either. A nurse came in to check on me and found me crying silently. Not from pain. From release. I was finally free. But freedom doesn't come without backlash. 2 days later, my phone buzzed nonstop, 30 missed calls, a dozen voicemails, messages from Chloe too. My parents had realized the money wasn't coming. And now they were scrambling. The tone of their messages shifted like a bad soap opera script, first confusion, then rage, then desperation. How dare you? You owe us. We raised you. We're going to lose the house. Not once did they ask how the surgery went. Not once did they ask about Ethan or Emily. Chloe's messages were different. They told me you were exaggerating. I didn't know it was that serious. Why didn't you tell me directly? I didn't have the energy to be angry at her. Chloe was a product of their lies, just like I had been for most of my life. So I sent her the truth. The full story. How they refused to help. How they called me a burden. How I almost died. She replied within minutes. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If I'd known, I would have been there in a heartbeat. Maybe there was still one person in my family who saw me. Later that week, Olivia and I sat down at the tiny kitchen table in my apartment. She just put the twins to bed. I told her I wanted to hire her, part-time for now, maybe more later. I can't keep doing this alone, I whispered. You don't have to, she said. That night, I lay in bed with pain pulsing through my stitches, but my heart felt lighter than it had in years. I'd chosen myself. I'd chosen my kids. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. Recovery was slow, every movement felt like a battle against my own body. But the pain was no longer just physical. It was layered deep, the kind that only comes when you realize that the people who were supposed to love you most never truly did. The twins adapted quickly to Olivia. They laughed again. They started sleeping through the night. It broke my heart a little, not because they were healing, but because their joy had returned so fast after I removed the people who were supposed to care for them. That was the real tragedy. The only one still trying to make sense of everything was Chloe. She came by one afternoon with a bag of groceries and a notebook full of questions. I need to understand, she said, sitting on the edge of the couch. They told me you were fine. That it was just some routine thing. I looked at her, exhausted and raw. I almost died, Chloe. And they knew that. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came. And they left me alone. They chose Elton John tickets over their daughter's life. She put her head in her hands. I believed them. I know, I said softly. So did I. It took Chloe a few more visits to fully grasp the extent of the betrayal. She stopped defending them. Stopped making excuses. One day she brought a small photo album and said, I'm done pretending. You deserve better. A few nights later, I received an email from my father. The subject line was just one word, cruel. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Because by then I already knew what it said, how I was ungrateful, how I'd ruined their retirement, how they were the real victims. And honestly, let them believe it. They'd always needed a villain, and I was done trying to convince them I wasn't one. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. I contacted a lawyer and had a will drafted. Olivia was listed as the emergency guardian for Ethan and Emily, not because she was perfect, but because she cared. Because she had proven in 2 weeks what my parents hadn't shown in 33 years. Support. Respect. Love. That weekend, Jessica called. Her voice was quiet, apologetic. She wanted to come visit. I brought lasagna, she said sheepishly when she showed up at my door. Store-bought. But still. We sat on the floor, the twins climbing all over her while she watched them with a kind of wonder I hadn't seen in her before. I believed what they told me, she admitted. That you were dramatic. That you didn't want to be part of the family. I smiled bitterly. They needed a scapegoat. And I played the role perfectly. Jessica looked at me for a long time. Can we start over? I didn't answer right away. But when Ethan climbed into her lap and handed her a toy truck, I figured maybe, just maybe we could. The following week brought a strange sense of peace. The air in my apartment felt lighter. The shadows of obligation that had loomed for years were finally gone. I didn't hear my phone buzz constantly with reminders to transfer money. I didn't dread every holiday, wondering if I'd be guilt-tripped into pretending everything was fine. For the first time in my life, silence was a gift. But the quiet didn't last. They showed up. Again. It was early Saturday morning when I heard the knock, a soft tap, then another. I peeked through the peephole. My mother. Alone. She looked older. Frail, even. Her makeup was too heavy, like she was trying to look composed, but her shoulders were hunched and her eyes darted nervously. I opened the door just enough to keep the chain on. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I just want to talk. I'm not interested, I said. Not now. She nodded like she expected it. You were always strong-willed, she said softly. Even as a little girl. Always wanted to do things your way. Is that what this is about? I asked. Control? No, she exhaled. It's about pride. And fear. And maybe some regret. For a second, I saw something real in her expression, not manipulation, not theater. Just a tired woman standing in the hallway of a daughter she didn't know how to love properly. I shut the door gently. Not out of anger. But because I wasn't ready. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Later that night, Jessica texted me again. They're starting to panic. Dad's threatening to sell the boat. Mom's been crying every night. I'm not defending them, but it's bad. I stared at the message for a while before typing back. So was leaving me in the hospital alone with 2 toddlers. She didn't respond for a few hours. When she did, all she said was, I know. And I'm sorry. That night I stood in the twins' room watching them sleep. Ethan's arm was wrapped around his sister's waist, and Emily's face was pressed into the side of a stuffed giraffe. They were safe. They were loved. They didn't know about betrayals or guilt or conditional affection. And I was going to keep it that way. I would be the mother I never had, not because I needed to prove anything, but because they deserved a world where love wasn't earned through sacrifice. Where support wasn't transactional. Where showing up meant something. I turned off the hallway light and whispered to the darkness, it ends with me. And I meant it. Word travels fast in families, especially when guilt and entitlement are at play. 3 days after I shut the door on my mother, I received an email. Not a text. Not a voicemail. An email with the subject line, urgent, let's talk like adults. It was from my father. The tone was predictably diplomatic, but it reeked of manipulation. He spoke about family unity and healing, then quickly shifted into financial stress, interest rates, their cruise cancellation, and how your decision has put us in a difficult position. It always circled back to that. My decision. Not theirs. Not the fact that they skipped out on their only grandkids during a medical emergency. Not the fact that they prioritized Elton John over my possible death. No, the villain in this story was me, because I refused to continue funding their delusion of retirement bliss. I didn't respond. Instead, I made another call, this time to a therapist I'd found through the support group. Her name was Dr. Farah, and from the moment she answered, I felt seen. Within 5 minutes, she said, "You've been taught that love is earned. That support has to be repaid with loyalty, no matter how much it costs you." And she was right. I had been conditioned to carry the emotional and financial weight of 2 adults who never lifted a finger for me unless there was applause. No more. That same evening, I logged into my bank account and redirected every automatic transfer, every dollar I used to send to their mortgage, into a separate savings fund for the twins. I named it Freedom. 2 days later, the group email came. My father had CC'd over a dozen family members, aunts, uncles, cousins, all with a grand tale of betrayal. How I'd cut off support out of spite, how my behavior was cruel and irrational, how they'd sacrificed for me for years. I didn't flinch. Because I was ready this time. I replied all with a single message. On Christmas Eve, while I was hospitalized for emergency surgery, my parents refused to watch their grandchildren. I could have died. They chose a concert instead. Everything I've done since has been to protect my children and myself. This is not cruelty. It's consequence. Silence followed. Except for Jessica, who called an hour later. They're livid, she whispered, almost impressed. But some of the family, they're on your side now. It didn't matter. I wasn't seeking allies. I was building boundaries and reinforcing them with every breath. That week, Olivia helped me rearrange the apartment. We moved the crib closer to my bed. Set up a desk near the window so I could work with sunlight on my face. Swapped the framed family photos for drawings the twins had made in daycare. The space felt new. Lighter. Mine. The phone calls slowed. The emails stopped. But the weight they'd tried to leave on my shoulders? I set it down and never picked it back up. I didn't realize how much of my life had revolved around their approval until I stopped trying to earn it. The silence was strange at first. No more calls. No more texts demanding explanations or demanding money. It was like they'd gone radio silent after my email reply. But I wasn't naive. That silence wasn't peace. It was strategy. Sure enough, a week later, Jessica showed up at my door with a look I recognized too well, the kind you wear when you've been caught in the crossfire. They're talking, she said before I even asked. To everyone. Painting you as this selfish daughter who abandoned her poor, aging parents after all they did for you. I almost laughed. All they did? I repeated. Like what? Gaslight me into thinking I was a burden? Guilt trip me into giving them almost a third of my income every month while they bought cruise packages and boats? Jessica sighed and handed me a pie she brought, a peace offering. I'm not here to defend them, she said quietly. I'm here because I think I see it now. That gave me pause. I talked to Aunt Diana, she continued. She's furious. She said she remembers when Mom complained at Thanksgiving that the twins were too loud, and said she'd rather spend time with well-behaved children like her friends' grandkids. That stung even now. I think she wanted to be a grandma to the idea of children, I said. Not the actual, messy, loud, loving reality. Jessica nodded. It was the first time we'd sat together in silence without resentment crackling between us. For once, we were two sisters, not competitors in a rigged game. Later that evening, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a copy of my birth certificate, folded neatly alongside a note in my mother's handwriting. You'll always be our daughter. One day you'll understand what it's like to have ungrateful children. We just hope it doesn't hurt you as much as you've hurt us. There it was. Not remorse. Not growth. Just guilt. Their final weapon. I tossed the note in the trash, then sat with Ethan and Emily as they ate cereal and smeared peanut butter on the walls. I watched their little hands, their innocent smiles, and I knew in my bones I would never treat them the way I'd been treated. Because I do know what it's like to have ungrateful parents. And I refused to become them. The morning sun filtered through the curtains as Emily climbed into my bed, still half asleep, dragging her stuffed giraffe by one floppy leg. Ethan followed seconds later, crashing beside me with the boundless energy only toddlers have at 6 in the morning. Can we have pancakes? He asked, crawling onto my back. Sure, I mumbled, muffled by a pillow. But only if you help. They both cheered and ran off, completely ignoring the fact that they were 2 and couldn't so much as reach the stove, let alone cook on it. Still, that moment, soft, chaotic, pure, filled a part of me that had been hollow for years. That was the thing about cutting off toxic people, it didn't just remove the pain. It made room for better things. Healthier things. People like Olivia, who came by later that morning with a latte in one hand and coloring books in the other. I thought you could use both, she smiled. I always can. We talked while the twins colored on the floor, her voice a quiet comfort in a world that had once been so loud with demands. She told me about another widowed mom she'd just met at the trauma support group, a woman named Janine who lost her husband in a fire. She had a daughter just a year older than Ethan. "We're thinking of starting a group playdate rotation," Olivia said. "Just moms who get it. No pressure. No judgment." The idea sparked something warm inside me. Later that day, I logged into my memorial site design account and saw 5 new inquiries, all referrals from someone in the support group. People were requesting beautiful, personalized tributes for their lost loved ones. Some included poems. Others asked for music integration or photo galleries. Each request reminded me that I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was creating meaning. Out of grief. Out of ashes. That evening, Jessica dropped by with groceries and a set of baby shoes she'd found on sale. "They were too cute not to grab," she said, handing them over with a shy smile. "Also, Mom called me again." I tensed. "She says she wrote you a letter. She keeps asking if you've forgiven her." I didn't respond right away. I didn't know how. Forgiveness wasn't a switch you flipped. It was a path. And I had only just started walking it. "I read it," I finally said. "It was different. Maybe even honest." Jessica nodded. "She's not the same. Neither is Dad. They've downsized everything. They're going to therapy." "I know," I replied. "But I don't think they did it for me." Jessica didn't argue. "They're trying," she said. "But it might be too late." I looked around my small but peaceful home. My kids were giggling in the living room. Dinner was simmering on the stove. My business was slowly growing. I was surrounded by people who saw me, respected me, valued me. "It's not too late for them," I said finally. "But it's too late for what was. Whatever comes next has to be on my terms." Jessica smiled. "I think you've always known your worth, Tash. You just forgot for a little while." And for the first time in years, I believed her. Weeks passed and the small routines of our new life became familiar and comforting. Ethan loved his new sandbox, and Emily insisted on watering the flowers every morning, even the fake ones I'd placed by the front steps. It didn't matter. They were thriving. And so was I. My memorial design side business continued to grow. I had a steady stream of clients now, mostly through word of mouth, and the thank you messages I received often brought me to tears. One woman even told me the website I made for her husband helped her teenage son open up for the first time since the funeral. I printed that message out and taped it to my office wall. Meanwhile, my parents remained strangely quiet. No letters. No unannounced visits. No guilt trips through Jessica. It was unsettling. Until one day, Olivia called me from the park while watching the twins. "Hey," she said cautiously. "I just ran into your mom." My heart skipped. "What?" She was at the grocery store next to the playground. She didn't approach us, just saw the kids, smiled, and kept walking. Did the twins notice? No. I made sure of that. I sat down, shaken. It was a test, wasn't it? She wanted to be seen. She wanted to show she could respect my space. And oddly enough, she had. That same week, I received another letter, this time from my father. It was shorter than my mother's, less eloquent, but far more raw. "Natasha, I never thought I'd be the kind of man who had to ask for another chance. But here I am. You didn't just cut us off. You forced us to look in a mirror. And we didn't like what we saw. I know you think it's too late. Maybe it is. But if you ever decide to let us try again, not as parents but as people, we'll be here. I'm sorry. Dad." I reread it 3 times. Then I showed it to Jessica, who simply said, "It's the most honest thing he's ever written." Later that night, I sat in the twins' room watching them sleep. Their faces were so peaceful. So untouched by bitterness. I realized I didn't want them growing up thinking people never changed. I didn't want them to think forgiveness was weakness. But I also didn't want to teach them that love meant sacrificing yourself to keep others comfortable. So I sent one text to my mother. "We can meet for coffee. Just you. No expectations." The next morning, she responded. Thank you. I'll follow your lead. Always. It was a start. A slow, careful step forward. But this time I wasn't walking alone. I chose a quiet little cafe nestled between a used bookstore and a florist-neutral ground, halfway between her condo and my house. I arrived early, seated myself at a window table and ordered chamomile tea, my new comfort ritual. I wasn't nervous, not really. I just felt cautious. Steady. When my mother walked in, she looked different. Not in appearance, she still wore her hair neatly pinned and had on that familiar pearl necklace, but in the way she carried herself. Slower. Less like she owned the room, more like she wasn't sure she deserved to be there. She spotted me and hesitated at first, but I gave a small nod. An invitation. She walked over and sat down, folding her hands in her lap like a child waiting for a verdict. Thank you for meeting me, she said. I nodded again, sipping my tea. She took a breath. I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About how we treated you. About what we expected of you. Expected, I echoed. Not what you asked. What you demanded. She nodded, eyes welling up. Yes. Demanded. We sat in silence for a moment. I was jealous, she admitted suddenly. You had everything I didn't have the strength to build. Independence. Boundaries. A spine. I didn't know how to deal with that in a daughter. You punished me for it. I know. We talked for over an hour. About things I didn't expect to, her childhood, her regrets, how she clung to Jessica because she felt needed and avoided me because I made her feel obsolete. It wasn't an excuse, but it was a perspective. I want to meet the twins, she said finally. When you're ready. If you're ever ready. I don't want them hurt, I replied. They don't need more disappointment in their lives. I know, she whispered. I wouldn't blame you if it never happened. I looked at her, really looked, and saw not the cold woman who once skipped out on her daughter's emergency surgery for a concert, but a grandmother who finally saw how deeply she'd failed. You'll start with 1 hour. Supervised. With me in the room. She let out a shaky breath. That's more than I hoped for. That night I told Jessica. She smiled. You've built this life, Natasha. You've earned the right to decide who gets to be in it. And she was right. This wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. It was accountability. Earned access. A chance. For the first time, the power wasn't in their hands. It was in mine. Spring came like a quiet victory. Sunlight slipped through the windows of our new home, casting warm patterns on the floor where Ethan and Emily played with crayons and cereal bowls. There was no drama here. No obligations. Just soft music, giggles, and peace. I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, finalizing a memorial site for a woman who lost her partner of 20 years. The client had sent a message saying my design made her cry, not because it was sad, but because it was beautiful. Healing. I knew that feeling. I lived it. My days no longer revolved around guilt or sacrifice. I worked because I loved to create. I raised my children because I wanted to give them a life filled with warmth, laughter, and honesty, everything I didn't grow up with. My parents had kept their word, surprisingly. Weekly supervised visits had begun a month ago. My mother brought puzzles and tiny cupcakes. She didn't overstep, didn't ask for anything. My father sat quietly, holding Ethan on his lap as he read aloud from picture books. They were trying, and for the first time I believed it wasn't just an act. But it didn't change the past. And I didn't want to forget the past, not anymore. The woman I was before the surgery, before the betrayal, needed to be remembered. Because she survived. Because she chose to rise. One evening, after putting the twins to bed, I stood alone in the doorway of their room. Watching their peaceful sleep, I whispered, "You'll never feel like an afterthought. Not while I'm breathing." I turned off the light and walked into the living room where Valerie was finishing her tea. She visited sometimes on weekends, bringing her own kids to play. She was the first person who showed me that kindness doesn't have to be earned through suffering. "You doing okay?" she asked. I smiled. I am. Better than okay. Jessica texted later that night, a photo of a bracelet she found online. Thinking of you. Fierce like a mother. I stared at that message for a long time. Not because it shocked me, but because it didn't. I had rebuilt a life where love was not conditional. Where family was chosen. Where strength was quiet, consistent, and mine. No longer desperate for approval. No longer owned by obligation. Just me. Whole. Standing in the sunlight of the life I chose and the family I deserved.